Good evening, and welcome to Crossfire Discussions, our weekly program dedicated to dissecting critical contemporary issues. Tonight, we delve into a question that strikes at the heart of corporate governance and ethical responsibility. Should CEOs be personally liable for corporate misconduct? This debate has gained considerable traction recently, particularly in light of several high-profile corporate scandals, where the consequences for top executives have been intensely scrutinized. Joining us to explore this complex topic are two distinguished experts: Dr. Ethan Williams, professor of business ethics, who will argue in favor of personal CEO liability, and Ms. Olivia Maxwell, a seasoned corporate lawyer, who will present the arguments against such broad personal liability. We will begin with opening statements from each speaker, followed by a moderated discussion, and conclude with closing remarks. Welcome, Dr. Williams and Ms. Maxwell.
Thank you, Sarah. The question before us is not merely a legal technicality. It is a fundamental issue of accountability in our economic system. I firmly believe that CEOs must be held personally liable for corporate misconduct. They are the ultimate decision makers, the captains of their corporate ships. Their actions, and indeed their inactions, directly shape corporate culture and dictate conduct. Personal liability is not about scapegoating. It's about ensuring that those at the very top, who wield immense power and reap significant rewards, are answerable when their organizations cause harm. Consider the deterrence effect. The prospect of personal financial ruin, severe reputational damage, or even imprisonment in egregious cases would serve as a far more potent deterrent than corporate fines, which are often viewed as a mere, quote, cost of doing business, and are ultimately borne by shareholders or consumers. This isn't about punishing honest mistakes made in good faith. It's about addressing willful negligence, deliberate wrongdoing, or a culture of turning a blind eye to illegal or unethical activities that flourish under a CEO's leadership. Furthermore, we must consider justice for victims. When corporations inflict damage, be it environmental devastation, widespread financial fraud, or consumer harm through unsafe products, personal liability for the CEO can offer a more tangible sense of justice. It can also open more direct avenues for compensation for those who have suffered, rather than relying solely on corporate entities that can be adept at shielding assets or diffusing responsibility. Current systems often fall short. Fines paid by the corporation can feel like a slap on the wrist, particularly when the illicit gains far outweigh the penalty. Such penalties do not sufficiently impact the individuals whose decisions led to the misconduct. Therefore, instating clear personal liability for CEOs is a necessary step to foster a culture of true responsibility, to deter misconduct at its source, and to ensure that justice is not just an abstract concept, but a lived reality for those harmed by corporate actions.
Thank you, Sarah. While Dr. Williams raises important points about accountability, the proposition of broad personal CEO liability, I believe, is fraught with complexities and potential negative consequences that outweigh its intended benefits. Modern corporations are extraordinarily complex entities, often global in scale, employing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of individuals. To hold a CEO personally liable for every instance of misconduct that occurs within such a vast organization is not only unrealistic, but fundamentally unfair, especially when they may have no direct knowledge or involvement in the specific wrongdoing. Consider the impact on risk aversion and innovation. If CEOs face the constant threat of personal ruin for actions taken by employees potentially many layers below them, it could lead to an excessively cautious approach to business. This hyper-cautiousness could stifle innovation, discourage necessary risk-taking, which is essential for economic growth and competitiveness, and ultimately harm the very dynamism our economy relies upon. Moreover, it could lead to a significant shortage of qualified and experienced individuals willing to step into CEO roles, particularly in industries that are inherently more complex or prone to regulatory scrutiny. It's crucial to remember that robust legal and regulatory frameworks already exist to address corporate misconduct. These include substantial corporate fines, stringent regulatory actions, and, importantly, provisions for holding individuals, including CEOs, criminally and civilly liable when direct involvement, conspiracy, or gross negligence is proven. Cases of fraud or intentional illegal acts by CEOs can and should be prosecuted under these existing laws. The challenge often lies in enforcement, not in a complete lack of available mechanisms. Finally, we must consider the CEO's primary fiduciary duty, which is to the shareholders and the long-term health of the company. While misconduct is unequivocally wrong, an overemphasis on assigning personal blame to the CEO can sometimes overshadow deeper systemic issues within the corporation, the culpability of other actors, or even external pressures and market conditions that may have contributed to the situation. A balanced approach focuses on improving corporate governance, strengthening internal controls, and robustly enforcing existing laws, rather than imposing a blanket personal liability that could have far-reaching, unintended negative consequences for business and the broader economy.
Thank you both for those comprehensive opening statements. Let's delve into some specifics. Dr. Williams, you mentioned this isn't about punishing honest mistakes. How do you define the threshold for misconduct that should trigger personal CEO liability? Is it any regulatory breach, or only for specific, egregious acts like fraud or systemic negligence?
That's a crucial distinction, Sarah. The threshold for personal liability should be high, focusing on situations where the CEO demonstrates a clear dereliction of duty. This would include direct participation in, or authorization of, illegal acts, certainly. But it must also extend to cases of gross negligence, where a CEO consciously disregards substantial risks, or fails to implement adequate systems to prevent widespread misconduct they should have reasonably foreseen. Turning a blind eye, or fostering a corporate culture where wrongdoing is tolerated, or even implicitly encouraged, should also meet this threshold.
Ms. Maxwell, Dr. Williams speaks of gross negligence or fostering a problematic culture. From a legal standpoint, what are the practical challenges in definitively establishing that direct line of responsibility or that level of culpability for a CEO in a large, complex corporate structure where tasks are heavily delegated?
The legal challenges are immense, Sarah. Proving that a CEO had direct knowledge of, or gave explicit orders for, misconduct deep within an organization can be incredibly difficult. CEOs delegate operational responsibilities for good reason. They cannot be omniscient. Establishing causation, that the CEO's specific action or inaction directly led to the harm, rather than failures in middle management or rogue employees acting against policy, is a very high bar. There's a significant risk of holding CEOs liable for systemic failures they inherited, or for isolated incidents they couldn't realistically prevent, blurring the lines of true culpability.
Ms. Maxwell, you touched upon risk aversion in your opening. If we were to see a significant shift towards widespread personal CEO liability, could this genuinely stifle economic growth, or make it substantially harder for companies, especially innovative startups or those in high-stakes industries, to attract top-tier CEO talent?
Absolutely, Sarah. The potential for negative economic consequences is very real. If CEOs are constantly looking over their shoulders, worried that any corporate misstep, even one they weren't directly involved in, could lead to personal financial ruin, their decision-making will inevitably become more conservative. This could mean foregoing promising but inherently risky ventures, slowing down innovation, and reducing competitiveness. Companies might also face massively increased costs for directors' and officers' liability insurance, which ultimately gets passed on. Furthermore, the pool of individuals willing to accept the immense responsibilities of a CEO role under such conditions could shrink, potentially leaving companies with less qualified leadership.
Dr. Williams, how do you respond to that concern? Is there a danger that a heightened regime of personal liability will deter capable individuals from taking on CEO roles, or lead to businesses becoming so risk-averse that they fail to innovate and grow effectively?
I believe that argument is somewhat overstated. Responsible, ethical leaders who are committed to robust compliance and a culture of integrity should not be unduly deterred. Instead, heightened personal liability would encourage the selection of CEOs who are genuinely prepared to accept full accountability for the organizations they lead. It might filter out individuals who are perhaps more attracted by the rewards of the position, without fully internalizing the profound responsibilities. True innovation and growth are not, or at least should not be, predicated on an ability to externalize the costs of misconduct. In fact, a more ethical corporate environment, fostered by accountable leadership, can lead to more sustainable long-term growth and enhanced public trust.
Dr. Williams, acknowledging the complexities Ms. Maxwell has raised, are there alternative or complementary mechanisms to ensure accountability that might be effective? For instance, could significantly higher corporate fines, more stringent corporate governance rules, or enhanced powers for regulatory bodies achieve similar deterrent effects without resorting to widespread personal CEO liability?
While all those measures, stricter governance, higher corporate fines, empowered regulators, are valuable and necessary components of a comprehensive approach, I believe they are often insufficient on their own to achieve the desired level of deterrence and accountability at the very top. Corporate fines, even substantial ones, can be absorbed by large corporations and treated as an operational expense. They don't always change the behavior of the key decision makers if their personal wealth and reputation remain untouched. Personal liability adds a unique and crucial layer of deterrence because it directly impacts the individuals who set the tone and make the ultimate strategic choices.
Ms. Maxwell, if not broad personal liability for CEOs in most instances of corporate misconduct, what improvements or alternative approaches would you advocate to more effectively address corporate wrongdoing, ensure justice for victims, and protect the public interest, while still acknowledging the operational realities of running a large company?
I advocate for a multi-pronged approach that strengthens the existing system, rather than overhauling it with broad CEO liability. This includes significantly enhancing the resources and enforcement capabilities of regulatory bodies. We also need to bolster whistleblower protection programs, as they are often crucial in uncovering misconduct. Furthermore, there should be a continued focus on corporate culture reform, driven by boards of directors, emphasizing ethical conduct from the top down and throughout the organization. For individual accountability, the focus should remain on vigorously pursuing cases where there's clear evidence of a CEO's direct involvement in illegal acts, fraud, or provable gross negligence, using the robust legal tools already at our disposal. This targeted approach ensures accountability where it's clearly warranted without creating undue risk aversion.
In conclusion, the argument for personal CEO liability is fundamentally an argument for genuine accountability. Those who occupy positions of immense power, who shape corporate destinies and impact countless lives, must bear profound personal responsibility for the conduct of their organizations. It is about ensuring that the buck truly stops at the top, not diffused within corporate structures or absorbed as a business cost. The prospect of personal consequences is the most effective deterrent against negligence and wrongdoing. We need a system where leaders cannot easily insulate themselves from the repercussions of significant misconduct occurring under their stewardship. This is essential for justice, for ethical business practices, and for rebuilding public trust in our corporate institutions.
To summarize, while the pursuit of accountability for corporate misconduct is paramount, imposing broad personal liability on CEOs is an impractical solution that risks significant unintended harm to business dynamism and innovation. It oversimplifies the complex realities of modern corporate governance. Existing legal frameworks, when robustly funded, effectively enforced, and continually refined, for instance, by strengthening whistleblower protections and ensuring regulatory bodies have sharp teeth, offer a more balanced and targeted approach to punishing wrongdoing. Our focus should be on solutions that effectively address misconduct and hold culpable individuals responsible, based on evidence of direct involvement or gross negligence, without unduly burdening leadership to the point of stifling responsible risk-taking and economic progress.
Dr. Ethan Williams, Ms. Olivia Maxwell, thank you both for an incredibly insightful and vigorous debate on this challenging topic. Your distinct perspectives have certainly illuminated the complexities involved. We've heard compelling arguments for direct CEO accountability as a powerful deterrent and a means of justice, countered by concerns about fairness, the complexities of large organizations, and potential negative impacts on innovation and leadership. The central question seems to revolve around finding that delicate balance. How do we ensure that those at the top are truly answerable for significant failings without creating a system so punitive that it paralyzes effective and ethical leadership? It's a question with no easy answers, and one that will undoubtedly continue to be debated in boardrooms, legislative chambers, and public forums. Thank you to our audience for joining Crossfire Discussions this evening.